Welcome to part 2. I hope you've enjoyed yourselves watching part 1 and you've learnt everything that you feel you need to learn. Hopefully you've left some comments in at this point and I'll be able to check them out. Maybe we make a part 3 video. For me, it's always good to be able to give you guys the information that you're after to make your racing better. Like I've said in previous videos, don't forget to hit subscribe, and give it a like, leave me a comment as I've already said, and click on that bell so you know that my videos have just come up if you want to watch more of them. So on this video we will be talking about Wheelbase, we'll be talking about Driveshafts, roll bars, camber links, Ackermann, weight bias, hinge pin height, and Gearbox Risers. Let's move on. First thing is Wheelbase. It's a thing that we've been playing with for many years and we use it to help us gain grip and lose grip, as well as play with how the car feels on the jumps and how it kind of works coming out of corners. Generally on carpet we're always on the long wheelbase setting on the rear, that is. Whereas when we come to dirt we go more to the medium and sometimes short, depending on what the surface is like. Whereas on the front we play with that to allow us to have more load transfer on the front. So on the front we can move the wishbone forwards and backwards, whereas on the rear we can move the hub. What changes when this happens? It's not just the positioning of that hub, we've also got the drive shaft angle. What you'll find is on the rear the drive shafts will be angling forwards. Sometimes when you run it on the short wheelbase setting, you'll be matching the amount of degrees towing that you're running. So let's say you've got 4 degrees towing, you'll have 4 degrees of drive shaft angle. And what that would do is make the drive shaft bind up a little bit, and so then the car stays flatter coming out that corner and it forces itself forwards. Whereas on the front, when we do the angle where they actually sweep backwards, we find we get more drive out of that, and that's quite a nice feeling, especially for on power steering. Get that steering angle on with it like that, it really pulls itself around the corner. It's a brilliant thing to do, but if you want to calm the front end down, just get rid of some of that load transfer as well when you're going into corners, just move those wishbones forwards. Makes it nice and easy. Don't forget to adjust your roll bar afterwards, because that does need to be adjusted. So that's those 2 bits on there. The next part is drive shafts. You wonder, drive shafts, what's that all about? On the rear of the car you'll see that we have a UJ joint. It's kind of 2 little cup pieces that come together with a bearing piece inside, and it goes round. We'll put that in the video for you to see as well as there's a CVD option, which is a constant velocity drive shaft. But let's look at actually how they function. The UJ joint is very free, and even under the highest loads still works really well. Whereas a CVD joint, when you put them on the car, you'll find you get more drive out the car. It will be like when you angle that drive shaft, adds more bind, and so then the car will stay flatter, it will drive it out of the corner better. But if it's a bumpy track you could actually lose a bit of grip because it won't go over the bumps as well. So for UJs we used them for the on power steering of the car that you're aiming for. So on carpet we find it gives us more on power steering. We find that on AstroTurf it's better on the bumps, and on the dirt racing, if their grip is there, again it allows the car to roll in the corner a bit more. But generally on AstroTurf and dirt we go to the CVD drive shaft on the rear. And if you wonder what drive shaft to use, just use the one off the lay down in the kit. That one works very well. On the front you've got the ability to put the Roche drive shafts on. These are very free. They don't offer as much drive as the UJ joint for when you come out the corners. But the freedom of those joints when you go to the very strong angles, let's say 40 degrees, that these drive shafts go to, well the front hub carriers go to, and the drive shafts have to meet that somehow. This will cause a bit of trouble to normal joints, so it allows it to work more freely, and you won't see the wheel kind of wanting to jump up and down, which we used to find when we had CVDs on the front of the cars in the past. So the Roche drive shaft is a brilliant thing, so check them out. Next thing to talk about, let's have a look at the list. Roll bars. Okay, roll bars is something that we play with a lot on 4-wheel drives. Generally on 2-wheel drives we don't use them as much, generally a thin one on the rear. On the 4-wheel drive, let's look at the rear and the front together. They work together to get the car around the track. They keep the car flat, as well as they help stop these wheels picking up or randomly getting into corners. Sometimes that can't be helped, especially if we run really low ride heights. If we imagine a carpet track, we go down the end of the straight, we hammer on the steering, the front right corner, it dips, you're taking a left, your rear wheel starts lifting up in the air. This could be a whole host of things. It could be that your rear shocks are stood up too much and your front are too laid over. But let's say they're perfect. The front roll bar can help with this. We can run a thicker front roll bar and a thinner rear one to help balance out the car. It's all on one plane at the end of the day. People seem to think the front is separate to the rear. They are a little bit because of flex, but in these moments, let's ignore the flex part and let's set the car up properly. So you might find that you do this and it makes the car edgy to drive. You have to straighten the car off a bit and you compromise your corner. So thicken up that front one, soften off the rear. Whereas if you come out the corners and the car starts waving at you from the track and you're like, hey, stop doing that, let's get on with racing. That's normally because the rear end's collapsing coming out the corner. Sometimes that can be because the rear roll bar is too soft, or the shock is laid over too much, or the rear link is too long. All these different things come into it. That's where you have to diagnose it. That's what we do at the track. We're looking at the cars, we look at the balance of the car on most of the corners, and if there's somewhere that we could change the car that isn't going to compromise steering or drive, that's what we change. But that's roll bars, talking about that balance. Things you can use a roll bar for is if you thicken up the rear, you can get a bit more front steering. If you soften off the front roll bar, you can increase your steering going into the corner again. But the biggest problem is keeping that front end supported. So generally on carpet we run a 1.8 or 1.9 front, and on the rear between a 2 and 2.1. Whereas when we go to dirt, we actually leave the rear one quite stiff. It's like when you have that CVD jointing, it keeps that rear end square and you get lots of drive coming out the corner. Whereas when we get to the front, we actually soften it off a bit more. We go down to 1.6 or 1.4 front, or even softer if we want the steering. You could take it off completely if you're in a circumstance where the front tyre isn't gripping up. So that's fine. So that's roll bars there. Next thing, camber links. If we look at the camber links on the rear, we've got many options. We've got a bunch that are on the hub, and we have 2 that are on the rear camber plates, as well as a height adjustment you can do. So let's talk about that for a second. The link length is to 1 degree important, and where you mount it is important, and at what angle you have it is important. Let's focus just on the angle of it first, ignoring the lengths or where it started to begin with. What does that do? People will talk about roll centers and stuff like that, and you have triangles that you can draw from that so you can pick up your roll center point, but let's not look at that for now. Let's just purely focus on the practicality of what it does. Okay, so when you have your ball stud, let's starting on 2mm on the L1 Evo anyway, where it's, let's say, in your middle position. If you're on a grippy track which you want to get the car to turn with more angle, it will fight that. It will be trying to generate grip for you and driving you through the corner. But you might not want that. You like, well, I want my steering, the rear end feels locked in. We'll raise that up. We raise ours up to our 0 position, which would be on some other cars you might have 4mm of washers on there. That allows the top of the tyre actually to lean over when you're going around the corner. It looks odd, especially when you film it. It looks very, very odd. But we're racing on surfaces that would be simulated in real life. We're racing on Velcro half the time. So this actually allows this kind of squarish tyre to come off as contact patch a bit more. And so you actually only ride on a bit of the edge of the tyre. I haven't got a tyre with me. Let's look at this truck tyre. If we roll this at an angle, you're only driving on that bit. Whereas if you have a really angled link, it'll be keeping that down when the car's going through roll in the corner. Whereas when you have a car that has a higher point, where the ball stud is connected up, that allows the top of the tyre to lean over, whereas actually when it's lower it pulls it in. Okay, so when you go through roll, it'll pull it in a little bit and you actually generate a bit of side bite as well as grip through the corner for that. So if you're on low grip conditions, you want to put a load of angle on that rear link, you want to go to 4mm. But if you're in a circumstance where the car is a little bit rolly, it feels lazy, having a bit of angle on that link will actually stiffen the car up a little bit and give you the feeling of a more agile car, more responsive car. So you might find that even though you're racing on what we'd call Velcro, is that, let's say, your 2mm of washers in the middle position, that feels quite good. That feels locked in, you can lean on it quite hard and it's feeling very consistent to drive. So it's all about understanding your circumstance. Like, look at the track, look at the conditions, what's it doing, what do I need from it? And you might go and raise up your ball studs, but that doesn't help you maybe in this circumstance. So try and evaluate what's going on. But this is that level on from if you've only been racing for a little while. these kind of things could help you, but you need to identify it. Don't just put what you believe is good on, because that might lead you down a bad path and suddenly your car's not feeling very good and someone will come over and tell you that it looks terrible. So you need to focus on these starting points and then just play it each way and come back. Whereas it comes to links, we run our link on our wider setting on the camber plate, and that supports the car when it goes through roll. It's a wider positioning, so then your offset is higher, so when you go through roll, okay, there's a greater movement that's happened relative to if you ran it right in the center. It's a softer movement, so it doesn't pull the tire around as much. So coupled with that, we then go to the outer setting. Let's pick the right words. We have 4 holes to play with each side, but we generally don't play with that. We don't play with the outside one, and we don't play with the inside hole. We play with the 2 in the middle. If we have a little look at our hub, maybe I could do a zoom in with the camera on a different shot. I'm on the second from the inside hole, and the second from the inside hole gives me more drive out the corners. So when you lean on it, it doesn't fall over. It has lots of supports. Whereas if I find I want more power steering and I've got plenty of drive out the corner and it's completely stable because of roll bars and your shock position and stuff like that, I move it out 1 more hole. And that is the 3rd hole from the inside, and that will give me more power steering. It lets the rear of the car roll. It lets it kind of collapse a little bit more in the corner. It doesn't support itself as much, and you'll get this more what we dare call oversteer coming out the corner, but a controlled amount of oversteer, which we're enjoying very, very much. The next thing to talk about is the Ackermann position. On our car, we have 3 positions. All of them are very useful in various situations. I'll just hold this up here. You might not be able to see it, but I'll maybe do a different camera shot of that. Knocking the mic around here. But we have the middle hole is the general setting you'll sit on. And that'll give us our normal steering that we like. But if it's too twitchy to drive, we'll move that Ackermann position forwards. What you'll find is that when you go through a corner, you'll get less outside wheel lock when you move that point forwards. The inside lock will always be the same. But relative to the outside wheel, when you start turning the more forward Ackermann position, it will just everything be smoother. Whereas when we go to the rearward on the Ackermann position, which will be decreasing the Ackermann effect, you'll be getting more of an equal movement. I think we've talked about it on the 2-wheel drive video, maybe I'd have to check it out, but you get more of this going on. Whereas that makes the car more twitchy, but you'll get a lot more steering from it around neutral. F1 cars, they have complete reverse Ackermann, so it means that their outside wheel actually does more, and that's because you get tyre slip. Your tyre angle is separate to the wheel because they have those large profile tyres. Maybe next year they'll be doing, or this year, they'll be doing something else with, because it has a lower profile tyre, you get less tyre slip, and so you get what a slip angle, let's call it, which is separate to the wheel, so then you can have more to conventional Ackermann. So this is where you notice on this car, when you move it back, it'll be quite aggressive, a little bit tricky to drive, whereas we move it all the way forwards, smoother to drive. You hack it into corner, whack on the steering, that's easy going in. Whereas you'll see on the Ackermann plate, we have 2 holes, and the radius arms connect to either the ones in the middle, which makes it parallel, or you can go to the angled ones. The angled ones, again, move that plate around and really pull that outside wheel around. Again, that gives you more steering. So check that out, try it out, see what you think. If you want a car that's really easy to drive, you want to go to the forward holes, whereas and the parallel holes on the centre, and that will make it nice and smooth. Whereas if you want the most aggressive car you've ever driven, you go rearward and then you go more angled with that piece. Anyway, enjoy that, see what you think of it. Maybe leave me a comment in the notes in the future when you've had a little go with it. The next thing to talk about is weight bars. Nice and simple, this one. Generally on our car with 4 drives, getting that weight a bit further forward, puts a bit more pressure over the front, makes it a bit more equal overall, and that makes it just generally easier to drive, nicer steering feel, nicer drive. Basically, the more weight we put to the back, it loads up the rear quarters, doesn't allow the car to drive out the corner very well, so that's where you'd have to stiffen things up and you get this decreasing gain. It's not good. So that's where we do that. Whereas when we race on the lower grip surfaces, we add our little radio tray weight and the speedo weight, and then you can put the brass strap on the front as well, and all these things help give you forward drive. So if you've got an L1 Evo, check out those weights on there, and that should help you give you a bit more forward drive. But the rest of the setup has to be good as well. So next thing to talk about, hinge pin heights. On the front we have a fixed height, we don't play with that. Haven't had a big need to so far, maybe something in future we can play with. We do have a front rake setting, but we generally live on the 8 degrees, which is generally more steering. The car follows the front a bit more when you're in the 8 degree rake setting, but whereas the kit setting at 10 degrees, that will smooth the car out a little bit more, but generally you'll lose a bit of steering feel after doing that. But that's something you can play with and have a go with. On the rear of the car, you'll see that my arrows are up on this one. See if I can zoom in on the camera. It's zooming on me at the moment. There we are, it's all in focus at the moment. So the arrows are up, which is pin high at the moment. I generally run pin high most of the time, and then we have a plate under the front that allows it to have the correct anti-squat angle, and we find that that supports the rear end in roll. Those wishbones are standing up a bit more, so it's harder, physically harder for the car to go through roll at these moments. When it's lower, you'll find that the car will then collapse. And this is where we get to the gearbox riser piece. Actually, let's just finish off the bit about the higher hinge pin. When you do raise that up, you'll find that you just get a bit more drive and you have more steering, it's more supported. It's basically where you just want to live 99% of the time. Sometimes we play with low, but that would be for circumstances where we want the rear end to move more and gain maybe a little bit of side bite, but you'll have to see. When we have the gearbox riser, we raise the whole lot. We raise the gearbox and all the hinge pins. And the reason we do this is because we allow our car to go even lower on ride height. And you'll be thinking, well, you can do that anyway. Well, yeah, you can, but your wishbones will now be more like this, so it will collapse more in the corner. By raising up the gearbox by another 2 mil, it allows us to drop the car by about 2 mil. And then it means the wishbones in the correct angle to allow the car to support itself in the turn and still feel very racy, even at a very low ride height of 12mm. You could probably go a bit lower, but you start having trouble on jump landings and stuff like that because there's nothing left. It's like touring car racing in the end, so that's not always good. But that's covered all those things. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I hope that you've gained something from this. Let me know what you want to see on the future videos, because I can do part 3 of 4-wheel drive setup and give you some more hints and tips on anything you want to know. Right, see you soon. Don't forget to hit subscribe. See you later. Bye.